Alright guys, welcome to another video on Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade. And in today's video, I am going to talk about this upcoming banner, which is going to feature SR Gakuganji and also the SSR version of Yaga. Now, a lot of people have asked me, whether there should be summary on this, especially if you're a free-to-play player. So I'm going to tell you guys the conclusion up front, and then I will go into the individual character to explain why did I reach this conclusion. So my suggestion for all of the players out there, whether free to play or pay to win, is that you should definitely be summoning on this banner. Not because of this SSR Yaga, because to me he is very much a pay to win character. He's good, but the incremental value he brings over the SR version of Yaga is not actually that much. So he's not really worth it, in my opinion, for majority of the players. However, what makes this banner really, really good is that you should be definitely trying to go for Gakuganji, and that is for both the free to play players and also the pay to win players out there. Okay, now he is only an SR character, so even if you have to pity him, it should only cost you 60 summons. And if I remember correctly, this game is going to give us 10 free tickets just by logging into during this time when the banner is live, and also we should be getting 10 tickets from the event as well. So in total that should already be 23 summons, so you just need to have enough cubes for another 40 summons in order to guarantee him for pity, which is definitely worth it in my opinion. Okay, now so why is Gakuganji such a good character for both the free to play players and also pay to win characters? Pay to win players, is because the amount of support he's able to do is the one which is able to increase taijutsu and also jujutsu damage received. And if you have watched my video from yesterday on how to maximize the damage correctly in this game, you realize is that all of the buff or debuff in this game come into 3 different categories. One is just a straight up overall damage dealt or damage debuff. Then the second category is when you are increasing your own taijutsu or jujutsu damage. And then the third one is when you do a debuff on the enemy taijutsu or jujutsu damage received. And because those 3 are different categories, the way the damage calculation formula works in this game is that when you have multiple buff from the same category, you'll be adding them together. However, when you have multiple buff from different category, you actually be multiplying them together, which makes it a lot stronger than just simply adding them together. And that's kind of why Gakuganji fall into this category, which is only for taijutsu and jujutsu damage debuff, and there are not actually many alternative characters within this category, which is why Gakuganji is so strong in comparison. Now the other characters within the same category is gonna be this SSR version of Yaga, but once again he's from the same banner, so I'm going to remove him out of the question now. But then the other choices you have essentially is going to be the blue ghetto and the green ghetto. And yes, maybe if you're a pay to win character, you may have already both of them. However, if you take a look at the amount of debuff he's able to give compared to Gakuganji, what you realize is Gakuganji is able to do 37.6% for 4 turns, which is a lot higher than Blue Gojo, who's only able to stack it for 3 turns. And even when you compare to Green Ghetto, what you realize is that unless the enemy is weak against green, otherwise Gakuganji is able to do a lot higher debuff than what Green Ghetto is able to do as well. And even if the Green Ghetto, you're facing someone who is green, if you add up the 2 numbers, that is still very much comparable to what Gakuganji is able to offer straight off the bat. So purely from the amount of debuff wise, Gakuganji is actually the strongest debuffer in this game, unless you count SSR Yaga, who's on the same banner. But if you're summoning for Yaga, then obviously you'll be summoning for Gakuganji as well. So that's kind of why for almost like all of the players out there, regardless whether you're free to play or pay to win, you should really be getting Gakuganji regardless of the situation. Okay, so that is basically the reason why he is pretty much like a must-have in my opinion. Now let's move on to the other character on this banner, which is the SSR version of Yaga. Now, what makes Yaga very interesting is that he has this debuff ability, which is very similar to what Gakuganji is able to do. However, it is slightly less because it's only gonna be at base level. It's only gonna at level 10 for vast majority of enemies, it's only going to be 30% and it's only for 3 turns. So that is definitely less than what Gakuganji is able to offer, right? However, if you also add in the fact that you are able to do extra if you're up against yellow characters, then all of a sudden this becomes 46.5 for 3 turns, which is still slightly lower than what Gakuganji is able to offer over 4 turns. However, it's a lot more comparable. But what makes him also really shine is the fact that he also have an auto skill, which is increasing your own Jujutsu and damage and also Taijutsu damage. And this is always going to be present because at the start of each turn. And all of a sudden, once again, if you actually remember the damage calculation, this is two different type of buff and debuff, right? One's increasing your own Jujutsu damage, one is decreasing or increasing enemy Jujutsu damage received. And because those are actually two different types of buff or debuff, naturally just by playing SSR version of Yaga, you are actually already having this multiplication effect built in. And that's kind of why if you actually do all of the maths in your head, or up with a calculator, I guess, what you would realize is that even if I ignore up against yellow enemies, so I'm just looking at 30% for 3 turns, and compare this to what Yaga is able to do, which is 45.8% for 4 turns. So even though this is a much higher number, and also for more turns, once you add in the multiplication effect, you actually realize the amount of buff your SR version of Yaga and also the SSR version of Yaga are able to do is actually very, very similar. And that's kind of why I do feel like the SR version of Yaga is actually going to be pretty much on par with the SSR version of Yaga for vast majority of the time. And that's kind of why I don't feel like there's a massive incremental value. Now, there are obviously certain situations where the SR version of Yaga would be better, or the SSR version of Yaga would be better. The situation where SSR version of Yaga would be better is obviously when the enemy is actually weak against yellow, then you naturally is going to do a lot more damage for your, a lot more buff for your allies. However, where SR version of Yaga is going to shine is actually if you do actually happen to play 3 supporters all from different category of buff or debuff, then naturally you already have this multiplication effect built into your whole team, unlike your Yaga SSR version of Yaga, who's already able to do this by himself. So the additional value of having 3 supporters is not going to be as much to what it's going to helpful for the SR version. And if you're going to be multiplying 3 type of buff already, then obviously the higher number is going to win, and that's why SR version wouldn't actually be better than the SSR version in those kind of scenarios. But like I said, in my opinion, those two are very much a tie. They are similar for probably like 70-80% of the scenarios. SSR Yaga is going to be slightly better for the yellow ones, but then you have the SR version, which is going to be better when you actually play 3 supporters on your team. So very much a tie, and that's kind of why I don't feel like there's such a need for you to go for this premium character when you can just use the SR version for a vast majority of time anyway with the same effect.